Welcome to Moon and Fire. I'm Emily Bailey, founder of Whole and Wild, where I guide women back to their sacred wisdom through ritual and cyclical living. I'm creating this sacred space for your whole self to be here, your wisdom, your longings, and your fierce power. This is a podcast for women who sense that there's more depth, more magic, more of their untamed essence, waiting to be remembered and unleashed. Welcome home, sacred woman. Let's begin. Today I'm exploring something that has been absolutely central to my own transformation and the work I do with hundreds of women. It's what I call the slow magic of rhythm. This is about the profound power of ritual rhythms, one of the 5 pillars of my Whole and Wild framework, and how our practices quietly but powerfully shape not just what we do, but who we become. I want to share something I've been sitting with lately. Have you ever noticed how you're always practicing something? Whether you're conscious of it or not, every day you're engaged in rituals and rhythms that are shaping your desires and through them, your very being. The question isn't whether you have practices, it's whether those practices are conscious or unconscious, whether they're leading you toward the woman you long to become or keeping you trapped in patterns that no longer serve. There's a beautiful quote I love. We become what we repeatedly do. But I believe it goes even deeper than that. Our habits and practices form and shape us into certain kinds of people. Our practices don't just shape our actions. They shape what we love, what we long for, what feels possible for us. And today, I want to explore this sacred alchemy with you. How conscious ritual rhythms can transform not just your daily life, but your deepest desires and your very essence. So I want to start with a word that might feel unfamiliar to some of you, liturgy. In the context of this work, liturgies are the deep patterns and practices that shape our story. They're like the daily ceremonies, both conscious and unconscious, that write themselves into our being over time. Like rivers carving paths through stone, these repeated practices shape not just what we do, but what we love, what we believe is possible, and who we become. Every environment you inhabit carries its own liturgy. Your morning scroll through social media is a liturgy. The way you rush through breakfast while checking emails is a liturgy. The habit of pushing through exhaustion instead of honoring your body's need for rest is a liturgy. These unconscious rituals are constantly forming your desires and your being. I experienced this powerfully a few years ago when I realized that my morning routine was actually a liturgy of scarcity and urgency. I would wake up, immediately check my phone, scan through emails with a growing sense of anxiety, and launch into my day already feeling behind. This wasn't just affecting my mood, it was shaping what I believed about time, about my capacity, about what was possible in a day. That liturgy was writing a story. There's never enough time, you're always behind, you have to hustle to be worthy. And because I practiced this story every morning, it became the lens through which I experienced everything. Cultural liturgies work the same way. The stories society tells us about who we should be as women, the rhythms of modern life that dim our wild nature, the patterns that pull us from our sacred knowing. All of these are liturgies that are shaping us, often without our own awareness. But here's the beautiful truth. Once you recognize these unconscious liturgies, you can begin to choose different ones. You can create what I call sacred liturgies, intentional practices that return you to your wild essence, rituals that rewrite limiting stories, rhythms that align you with natural wisdom, ceremonies that awaken sacred remembering. So let me share with you what I've discovered about how this transformation actually works. It's a sacred dance with 3 movements. First, there's environment and practice. You're always practicing something. Every space you occupy, every routine you follow is quietly forming your desires before conscious thought even enters the picture. Your daily routines become either sacred rituals or unconscious patterns. Then comes the shaping of desire. This is where the real magic happens. Your practices literally form what you love. The environments you inhabit influence what you want. So regular rhythms shape your deepest longings. What you repeatedly do becomes what you repeatedly desire. Finally, there's the formation of being. Your shaped desires influence your choices. Conscious practice reforms your longing. New rhythms transform your essence. Your being literally emerges from your practice. Consider this example. Imagine a woman feeling disconnected from her creativity, convinced she just isn't a creative person anymore. Upon exploring her daily rhythms, she might discover that every pocket of time she could have used for creative expression is filled with consumption, social media, news, other people's content. A simple morning liturgy could transform this. Before touching her phone, lighting a candle, placing a hand on her heart, and spending 10 minutes with a journal, letting whatever wants to emerge flow onto the page. No pressure, no goals, just the practice of creating space. Within weeks, something might start to shift. Not just in her creative output, but in her desire itself. She might begin craving these morning moments. The practice would be reshaping what she loves. And as her desires shift, so would her sense of identity. She wouldn't be forcing herself to be creative. She would be becoming someone who naturally desires creative expression. That is the slow magic of rhythm. It doesn't happen overnight, but like water wearing away stone, consistent practice creates profound transformation. One of the most liberating things about this is understanding that there are multiple entry points for transformation. So you don't have to wait for some perfect moment or complete life overhaul. You can begin exactly where you are. You might enter through conscious practice, deliberately choosing new environments, creating sacred containers, establishing transformative routines, letting new practices shape your desires. This is what I did when I replaced my anxious morning phone scrolling with a ritual of lighting a candle, placing my hands on my womb, and asking, what does my body need today? Or you might begin with awareness of current shaping, simply recognizing the influences that are already at work in your life. Notice your existing rhythms. Understand which environments lift you and which drain you. Witness how your current practices are forming your desires. Sometimes awareness alone begins the transformation. A third doorway is intentional reformation, selecting specific sacred practices to replace unconscious ones, creating new environments that support who you're becoming, establishing conscious rhythms that align with your deepest values, actively reshaping your desires through ritual. I want to be clear about something. This isn't about perfection or rigid discipline. It's about conscious choice. It's about recognizing that you're already always being shaped by something and deciding to participate actively in that shaping. So how do we actually work with this understanding? Let me share some practical ways to begin cultivating sacred rhythms in your own life. Start with environmental awareness. Take an honest audit of your current influences. What are the liturgies that are already operating in your life? Notice existing rhythms, morning, evening, transitions between activities. Understand which practices are serving you and which ones are unconsciously shaping you in ways that no longer align with who you're becoming. Then move into sacred choice. Select one small area where you'd like to create conscious change. Maybe it's your morning routine, or your evening wind down, or how you transition from work to home. Create an intentional practice for this time. It doesn't have to be elaborate. Honestly, sometimes the simplest rituals are the most powerful. And then allow for desire formation. This is where patience is important and essential. Trust that as you maintain your new practice, your desires will begin to shift. You might start by having to remind yourself to do the chosen ritual, but over time, you'll find yourself naturally craving it. Let the practice shape your longing. Witness this transformation with curiosity rather than judgment. And finally, honor the being transformation that emerges. Notice the subtle shifts, how you feel different, what you're drawn to, what feels possible that didn't feel possible before. Celebrate these changes, no matter how small. Trust in the power of practice to create profound transformation over time. Consider a woman who feels deeply disconnected from her body's wisdom. A simple evening practice might transform this. Before bed, placing hands on the belly and asking, "What do you want me to know?" Just that. No journaling required, no elaborate ritual, just the practice of asking and listening. At first, she might feel nothing, but with consistent practice, subtle responses could begin to emerge. Perhaps a tightening that means slow down, a warmth that means yes, this direction. The practice would be creating a new pathway of communication. More importantly, it would be reshaping her desire to listen to her body. She would be becoming someone who naturally seeks her body's counsel. So let me guide you through creating your own sacred liturgy, a ritual rhythm that can begin reshaping you from the inside out. First, identify one transition point in your day where you'd like to create more consciousness. Maybe it's that moment when you wake up, the transition from work to evening, or the threshold into sleep. Choose a time that already exists in your routine rather than trying to carve out something entirely new. Got it? Okay. Next, design a simple ritual for this transition. Remember, we're going for sustainable, not elaborate. So your ritual might include a physical gesture. We've talked about things like lighting a candle, placing your hands somewhere on your body, taking 3 deep breaths, any of those or other options. It also might include an intentional question, like, what am I grateful for? Or what does my soul need? Or what am I ready to release? Depending on who you're wanting to become or what you're wanting to consciously shape, this question will vary. Your ritual might also include a moment of stillness or a moment of gentle movement, and a closing gesture that marks the completion of the ritual. Okay. To start with, I want to invite you to keep it under 5 minutes. The power isn't in the length, but in the consistency. If you want, you can pause this podcast, go ahead and write this down, journal about what feels right to you. I also put a lot of work into the episode resource guides, so feel free to jump into the show notes and download that if you want to take it even a little bit further. Now, set a sacred intention for this practice. What quality or state of being would you like this ritual to cultivate? Is it peace? Is it creativity? Is it connection to your intuition? Let this intention infuse your practice without making it a rigid goal. And finally, commit to showing up for 13 days. In many traditions, 13 is a sacred number of transformation. It's long enough to begin creating a new neural pathway, but short enough to feel manageable. Notice what shifts in these 13 days, not just in the moment of your practice, but in how you move through your entire day. And remember, every practice is a line in your story. Every ritual is a chapter in your becoming. And every rhythm is a thread in the larger narrative of your transformation. Choose your liturgies consciously and watch as they write new possibilities into your being. What I find most beautiful about this work is that it reveals transformation as a sacred cycle rather than a linear process. Your environment influences your practice, which creates rhythm, which shapes desire, which transforms being, which opens you to new practices, and the cycle continues eternally. You can enter this cycle at any point. Maybe you begin by changing your environment, clearing clutter, creating a small altar space, or simply opening your curtains to let in more light. Or perhaps you begin with a single practice, trusting that it will create its own rhythm over time. The key is to understand that you're not separate from this cycle. You're always within it. The question is whether you're moving through it consciously or unconsciously. When you choose consciousness, you've become an active participant in your own becoming. I think this is a really good place to note that when you also recognize in yourself that there are parts of who you are or what you desire that you don't like, when you notice malformed desires that you wish weren't in you, sometimes our reaction to that is guilt or shame, right? And that's normal. This, what I'm inviting you into here, is an invitation for what to do instead of just sitting in the guilt and shame and allowing that to be the end. Like, oh, I saw this part of myself that I wish wasn't there. End of story. I'm inviting you through this to be an active participant in your own becoming. So if there's a malformed desire in you that you've discovered, instead of just sitting with it and wishing it wasn't there, become an active participant in becoming who you desire to be, in reshaping or realigning that desire with the kind of person, the kind of human you want to be in this world. I think of this as the slow magic of rhythm because it works the way seasons change or flowers bloom, gradually, almost imperceptibly, but with an inevitable power. You don't see a plant growing day by day, but tend it with consistent care, and one day you're amazed by the blossom. Your sacred practices work the same way. Each repetition is like water on a seed, nurturing something that will eventually break through the soil of your current reality and bloom into a new possibility. As we come to the close of our time together, I want to leave you with this invitation. What if you chose just one unconscious liturgy in your life and transformed it into a sacred practice? What if you trusted that this simple shift could begin reshaping not just your days, but your entire desires and your very being? The slow magic of rhythm is available to you right now. You don't need special tools or perfect circumstances. You just need the willingness to begin, the patience to continue, and the trust that your consistent practice is quietly working its transformation even when you can't see the results yet. Just remember that any time is a good time to begin. Sometimes I look back and think, man, if I had begun when I wanted to begin instead of waiting for the perfect moment, I'd already have been doing it for, X amount of time. So just remind yourself that now is ready, that you are ready now. This week, I want to invite you to become aware of the liturgies that are already shaping your life. Notice them with curiosity rather than judgment, and then choose one small way to introduce more consciousness, more sacredness, more alignment with who you're becoming. Remember, your practices are portals to power. Small, sacred acts create profound shifts. Rhythm creates the container for magic. And you have everything you need to begin this transformation right where you are. May you trust the slow magic of sacred rhythm. May you choose practices that align with your becoming. May you witness the transformation of your desires. And may you emerge more fully into who you were always meant to be. Remember the sacred cycles. Reclaim your radiant fire. Unleash your intuitive magic. Thank you for being here, sacred woman. Until next time.